The sky split open as the first of the invader ships entered Earth's atmosphere, their massive hulking forms dwarfing the tallest skyscrapers. They descended slowly at first, their colossal shadows, casting across the world below. Cities trembled beneath their weight, the ground vibrating, as if it could sense the coming storm from the depths of the earth. An ancient power stirred with every inch. The alien fleet neared humanity, remained blissfully unaware of the threat, until the moment was almost too late. People on the streets looked up at the sky, seeing the gleam of metal cutting through the clouds. The faint hum of their engines echoed across the land. A growing unease began to spread from city to city like an invisible wave. The invaders knew this planet was nothing more than a backwater world. With no defenses, they had already crushed hundreds of civilizations. Like this one, their weapons capable of turning entire cities into rubble with a single blast. They had studied Earth's resources and found them ripe for plunder, yet it was the people of Earth who puzzled them despite their seemingly primitive nature. The humans had fought back against smaller threats before, but never on this scale. The first ships to land touched down with a ground-shaking thud, and from them poured the invaders, armored and imposing, each soldier a towering figure clad in technology far beyond anything Earth had ever seen. Their weapons crackled with deadly energy. They were ready to sweep through cities with ease. The humans would have no time to fight, no hope to resist. Their commanders aboard the warships smiled at the ease of the operation. They had faced far more formidable foes, but Earth was nothing to worry about. Their forces had already begun sending the first communications across the stars announcing their victory. Before the war had even begun, as their troops disembarked from the ships, they moved with precision and speed. Their first target was a city of millions located on the coast. It would fall without a fight. The humans had no chance, and yet, as the soldiers marched through the streets, no screams of fear reached their ears. There were no frantic calls for help, no signs of human activity at all. It was as though the city had emptied out overnight. But that couldn't be true. They hadn't been here long enough to evacuate their target area. Still, the silence was unsettling. Every building stood as if waiting, every window locked tight, every street empty. It wasn't normal. No matter how they tried to dismiss it, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The aliens moved into the city's center. Their communications began to buzz with reports that something was happening. Their systems began to flicker. The air began to hum with a strange energy, nothing that Earth's technology could create. Yet something was shifting beneath their feet. The ground felt different to their boots. The city wasn't just abandoned, it was alive. But how could that be? They had seen no signs of any kind of advanced technology on the surface. No one had expected anything more than a simple military operation. But as the first wave moved deeper into the heart of the city, they began to realize the truth. This planet wasn't what they thought it was. Earth wasn't some helpless world ripe for the taking. It was a sleeping giant, and it had just woken up. The invaders moved deeper into the city, their boots clanging against the pavement as they advanced, their leader at the forefront, scanning the surroundings with a sense of calm confidence. The city's eerie silence hung in the air like a thick fog, unsettling, yet not immediately threatening. They had anticipated some form of resistance, maybe a few scattered humans trying to defend their homes or fleeing for safety. But there was nothing, not a single soul to be found. The leader issued orders to establish control over the city, but the hesitation among the ranks was palpable. Something felt off. They continued marching, but the sensation of being watched grew stronger. With every step beneath their boots, the ground seemed to pulse, almost like it was breathing. This wasn't the kind of planet where things like that happened, yet here it was happening, and the hum in the air continued to build like an unseen storm on the horizon. Something ancient stirred beneath the city, something far older than the invaders or their empire could comprehend. Still, they pressed on, undeterred, convinced that the humans were nothing more than prey beneath their might. They reached the central square of the city, where a massive monument stood tall and unmoving, the centerpiece of the human capital. It was here that they would declare their victory. When the leader stepped forward to address the fleet, he felt the vibration grow stronger. The ground seemed to hum in a way he could not ignore. It felt like something deep below the earth had awakened from an endless slumber, as if a great beast had stretched its limbs. The aliens' communication systems began to glitch. Feedback reverberated through the speakers. A warning signal flashed across the leader's control screen, and for the first time uncertainty flickered in his eyes. His fingers hovered over the command panel, but nothing happened. His attempts to initiate communication with the fleet were futile. The screens before him flickered once, twice, and then went black. The invaders paused. They weren't sure what was happening, but they could feel the change in the air. It was palpable. It wasn't the static charge of battle. It was something more primal, more unsettling, a shift in the very fabric of reality itself. The leader barked orders to his officers, but they too were staring at their malfunctioning systems. Their once advanced technology no longer responded with its usual precision. The communication lines to their fleet went dead one by one. They lost contact with their command ships hovering above the city. As their link to the stars slowly slipped away, they were cut off, isolated and alone on a strange planet that felt less and less like a helpless world and more like a sentient being turning its gaze upon them. A low rumble emanated from the depths of the earth beneath them, and the entire square shook. It wasn't an earthquake, but something far more calculated, more deliberate. The invaders felt a chill crawl up their spines. They had conquered countless worlds. Never before had they faced anything like this. As the shaking intensified, the first cracks appeared in the ground, fissures stretching across the city like the earth itself was being torn apart. And through those cracks came something new, something that wasn't supposed to exist beneath Earth's surface. The invaders' weapons flickered as their ships above them began to shudder. An invisible force pushed back against their systems, their very presence no longer welcome on this world. A voice echoed deep within their minds. It was not a language they understood, but it was a message they could feel. It spoke of power, it spoke of protection, and it spoke of an unyielding will. The Earth was alive, and it was fighting back. The invaders scrambled, trying to make sense of what was happening. Their technology, once flawless and precise, now seemed to malfunction at every turn. Their communications were down, their weapons useless, and the city around them was alive in a way they could not comprehend. It wasn't just the ground beneath their feet. Something more intangible, something beyond their understanding, had awakened. They were no longer in control. The leader's mind raced. He had never faced an enemy like this. He had seen worlds crushed beneath the weight of his fleet, civilizations reduced to ash, without so much as a whisper of resistance. But this was different. The humans had barely lifted a finger, yet the entire planet seemed to have turned against them. He barked commands to his officers, but his voice faltered. Even their most basic systems were failing. Their weapons, designed to tear apart planets, could not even get a lock on the simple structures before them. Every shot missed. Every effort to regain control only seemed to make things worse. The air around them seemed to thicken, charged with an energy they could neither see nor understand. The vibrations from the earth grew stronger, and a low hum filled the space, growing louder with each passing second. The ground cracked again, and this time, it wasn't just a small fissure. It was a deep rift that split the street wide open. From the depths of the crack, strange tendrils of energy reached up, swirling and twisting like living vines. The invaders' eyes widened in disbelief. They were seeing things that defied all logic. The earth itself was reacting, and not in the way they had expected. They had assumed Earth was a primitive world with no understanding of advanced technology or power. But they were wrong. The planet had been waiting for them, for the right moment to reveal its strength. The leader attempted to retreat, but his orders were met with chaos. His soldiers, once confident and unwavering, were now looking over their shoulders in fear. They had never been taught to fight against something like this, something that didn't operate by the rules of war they knew. The sky above them darkened, and an unnatural storm began to form, swirling with energy. In the distance, the remaining invader ships in orbit began to tremble. Their once stable orbits were becoming erratic, as if pulled by an invisible force. The crew aboard the command ships scrambled to regain control, but their efforts were in vain. Their ships, designed to withstand the harshest of environments, were now being torn apart from the inside out. The leader's thoughts raced. The fleet was lost. His soldiers were lost. They were powerless against this planet, this force that had so quickly turned the tide. And then, through the rising chaos, a voice echoed in his mind, a voice unlike any he had ever heard. It was not a human voice, nor was it an alien one. It was something ancient, a presence that seemed to stretch across time and space. The voice didn't speak in words but in feelings, in pulses of raw energy. It spoke of protection, of strength, of a world that would not be conquered. The leader felt the weight of that presence in his bones. Earth was not just a planet. It was a living being, and it was angry. It was fighting back, not with weapons, but with the very fabric of reality itself. And the invaders were nothing more than intruders in a place that would never bow to them. The leader staggered back, his mind struggling to process what was happening. The ground beneath his feet continued to tremble, and the rift in the city widened. Tendrils of energy reached higher, twisting and writhing like they were alive. The alien soldiers, once the most feared warriors in the galaxy, were now paralyzed by fear. They had never experienced anything like this, something that went beyond their understanding of science, beyond their ability to control. The Earth had become an enemy that they could neither see nor fight. As the hum in the air grew louder, the invaders' systems continued to malfunction. Their weapons, once capable of obliterating entire fleets, flickered and sputtered. The communication links to their ships in orbit remained dead, and the sky above them darkened further, swirling with energy. The invaders' command structure began to fracture under the strain. Officers scrambled, trying to regain control of their units, but there was nothing they could do. They had never expected this kind of response. They had expected an easy conquest, a simple exercise of power. Instead, they were trapped on a planet whose very essence was rising up against them. The leader's thoughts became frantic. His mind raced as he tried to process what was happening. He had seen entire civilizations crushed by the Empire's might, their populations extinguished without a second thought. Yet this world, this Earth, was fighting back with an unimaginable power. The leader had seen nothing in his empire's vast archives to prepare him for this. He couldn't even begin to comprehend what was happening. It wasn't just that the planet was alive. It was as if the planet itself had decided that the invaders were not welcome, that they would not pass. He looked to his officers for guidance, but they were just as lost as he was. Panic was spreading through their ranks. Soldiers who had once marched with unwavering confidence now stumbled in confusion, their eyes wide with disbelief. They tried to fire their weapons again, but every blast missed its mark. Their once great warships above them began to sway in the sky, as if caught in an invisible storm. The very atmosphere seemed to reject their presence, pushing them back with unseen hands. And then, as if the planet had made its final decision, the Earth struck back. A violent surge of energy erupted from the ground, sending shockwaves through the city. The invaders' forces were thrown off their feet, their armor crumpling under the sheer force. Buildings around them shook and collapsed as the very foundation of the city buckled beneath them. The rift in the ground widened, releasing a pulse of energy that tore through their ranks, disintegrating weapons and vehicles alike. The invaders' advanced technology, so feared across the galaxy, was useless against the raw, ancient power that Earth had awakened. The leader tried to regain his composure, but it was futile. The destruction was happening too quickly, too violently. His forces were disintegrating in front of him. His ships were falling from the sky. His soldiers were scattered and broken. The Earth had not just defended itself, it had turned the tide in a matter of moments. There was no strategy left, no plan. The invaders were no longer conquerors. They were fleeing. The once mighty fleet was now nothing more than a collection of broken ships, retreating in disarray. Earth's power had overwhelmed them. The leader felt a deep sense of dread. The realization hit him like a freight train. The Empire had underestimated this world, and now they were paying the price. The invaders were running out of time. Their once pristine fleet was in chaos, its ships falling out of formation, their technology unable to keep up with the rising storm that had taken hold of Earth. Every attempt to regain control was met with failure. Weapons systems locked up, navigation systems scrambled, and even the most basic communication lines went dead. What was once an unbeatable force was now crippled, stranded in a hostile world they didn't understand. The leader stood at the edge of the wreckage, his eyes scanning the sky as the storm clouds above darkened further. The ground beneath his feet continued to tremble, as if the planet itself was alive, moving and shifting in response to their presence. Something deep within the Earth was causing all of this, something far more powerful than they had ever anticipated. Their command ships, which should have been well beyond the reach of any force on Earth, were now in the process of disintegrating. One by one, the mighty vessels were being torn apart, their hulls groaning under pressure, their weapons useless as if some invisible hand was crushing them from the inside. The leader's heart pounded in his chest as he realized the scope of their failure. It wasn't just Earth's inhabitants that were a threat. It was the planet itself. As the fleet above began to break apart, a deep, reverberating rumble shook the ground, louder than anything they had experienced before. The Earth was opening up beneath them, large cracks forming along the streets, and through these cracks, strange energies began to rise. These energies had no source that they could see, but they felt them all around. It was as if the very core of Earth was pushing back against their invasion. The leader's mind raced, but there was no way out. He could not flee. He could not fight. He could not communicate with his homeworld. The invaders' once proud fleet was being undone by the very planet they had sought to conquer, and all they could do was watch in horror. Back on the surface, the invaders' soldiers were no better off. They had spread throughout the city, hoping to secure some sort of victory. But now they were lost in the chaos. The human resistance they had expected to easily crush had never materialized. In its place, Earth itself was rising up, shaking off their presence as if it had never been there. Every building began to tremble, and structures that had stood for centuries began to crumble to the ground, as if the Earth was reclaiming what had been taken. The soldiers' weapons sputtered and fell silent, their once deadly energy now dissipating harmlessly into the air. They raised their rifles, only for them to glitch and spark in their hands. Nothing worked. Nothing had any effect. The planet had already decided its response. The sky above flickered with strange lights, like an aurora of violent energy, stretching across the heavens. The soldiers looked up, their faces pale, as they realized what was happening. They had made a terrible mistake. The humans were not the only defenders of Earth. The planet itself was its protector, and now it was unleashing its power, a force they could neither understand nor withstand. The leader tried to call for retreat, but it was too late. The invaders were no longer in control of the situation. They were no longer the conquerors. Earth had become their judge, their executioner, and there was no escape. The air grew thick with an unnatural charge, crackling with raw energy. The invaders' ships, once symbols of their empire's vast power, now hung limply in the sky, their once pristine metal hulls warped and bending, as if the very atmosphere was trying to suffocate them. The ground beneath the invaders' feet was no better, with deep fissures spreading like veins across the city, as though Earth itself was bleeding out its fury. The leader, once so confident, stood frozen, unable to comprehend the magnitude of their situation. His thoughts were scattered, his orders lost in the chaos. His empire had crushed hundreds of civilizations, and yet here he was, standing on a planet that had turned against them without so much as a single shot fired by humanity. The invaders had not expected this. No one had. Far above, the remaining fleet ships were losing control. One by one, their engines sputtered and failed. The invaders' technology, the backbone of their entire conquest, was useless. Communications with the planet's surface had stopped entirely. Every attempt to re-establish contact with the fleet failed as their signals were absorbed into the rising storm. There was no response. No help would come. The storm itself intensified, the sky swirling with energy that seemed to defy logic. The air was alive with a power that resonated through every molecule. The leader felt it in his bones. The planet wasn't just reacting to their presence. It was fighting back, and it was winning. Down below, in the city, the invaders' soldiers were beginning to panic. They had scattered across the streets, hoping to find some semblance of control, but all around them, Earth's wrath grew stronger. Buildings continued to crumble, and the ground shook beneath them, opening wider cracks, some deep enough to swallow entire sections of the city. There was no place to hide, no place to run. The invaders' once formidable weapons were useless now, their systems erratic, firing wildly with no guidance. Even their attempts to launch attacks on Earth's surface were futile. Each missile, each energy blast, was swallowed by the strange force in the air before it could reach its target. Nothing they did had any effect. The soldiers began to realize that they were not dealing with an enemy force but with the planet itself. Earth had awakened, and it was not just defending itself, it was cleansing itself of their presence. The invaders were not just losing, they were being erased from the fabric of this world. And then, in an instant, the leader understood. Earth had never been the weak, helpless planet they thought it was. The humans had no need to fight back directly. The planet itself, in all its ancient power, had decided that it would not be conquered. And now, it was showing them what true power looked like. With one final surge of energy, the leader's command ship began to break apart. The ship's once invulnerable shields flickered, and then failed completely as cracks appeared in its hull. The rest of the fleet was no better off. One by one, the ships above Earth's surface began to disintegrate, falling from the sky like burning meteors. They had been outclassed by something far older and more powerful than they had ever imagined. The leader stumbled, his knees buckling under him. He looked up at the sky, now alive with flickering lights, and realized that there was no escape. The invaders had been defeated. Earth had won. And they were not going to survive this. The skies above Earth had become a chaotic battlefield, but it wasn't a fight between two armies. It was a one-sided war, where the invaders were the prey and the planet itself was the predator. As the last of their ships fell from the sky, engulfed in flames, the invaders were left to face their ultimate reckoning, alone on a world that had rejected them. The leader, now stranded on Earth's surface, stumbled over the cracked pavement as the ground continued to shake. The once immense alien fleet had been obliterated, each ship crumbling under the overwhelming force of Earth's defense. There was no order left to give, no command that could be made. The invaders were scattered, broken, and now utterly insignificant. The ancient power beneath Earth had done its work. The remaining invader soldiers were scattered across the city, their ranks shattered. Some were trying to regroup, others were huddling in fear, their weapons discarded as they realized that they no longer had any means of escape or survival. The humans they had hoped to conquer had not even fought back. Earth itself had taken control. It had fought on its own terms. A loud crash echoed in the distance, and the soldiers turned to see another structure crumbling into the abyss. Earth's wrath had not abated. The planet was still alive, still punishing them for their intrusion. The storm in the sky seemed to swirl faster, the unnatural aurora lighting up the entire atmosphere with bursts of violent energy. It was as if the planet was cleansing itself, erasing every trace of the invaders' presence. The leader's mind raced, but there was no strategy left to employ. His empire, his fleet, his soldiers, they were all gone. The invaders' advanced technology had been no match for the ancient power that resided in the Earth. The planet had responded swiftly, ruthlessly, and there was no counterforce. Their conquest had lasted mere hours before it had turned into their annihilation. He fell to his knees, the ground trembling beneath him as he tried to regain his composure. He couldn't comprehend how they had been so wrong. Earth had been underestimated. It had been dismissed as insignificant, a place unworthy of notice. But now, in the wake of their defeat, the invaders saw the truth. Earth was not some isolated world. It was not a defenseless speck in the vastness of space. It was something far older, far more powerful. The humans, they now realized, were merely its stewards, caretakers of a planet that had the strength to defend itself. And when provoked, it would unleash that strength in a way no empire could withstand. The leader looked up at the sky one last time. The storm raged on, but now it was a symbol of Earth's victory. It wasn't a random occurrence or a freak of nature. It was deliberate, a response to their invasion. The invaders had overestimated themselves and underestimated Earth. And now it was too late for any of them to escape. As the final pieces of the invaders' forces crumbled, the leader understood one undeniable truth. Earth had not just defended itself. It had eradicated them, without a single human lifting a weapon. The invaders had been outmatched by a force far beyond their comprehension. The remnants of the invader forces lay scattered across Earth's surface, their once proud empire reduced to nothing more than rubble. The leader, the last of his kind on this world, stood among the broken remains of his fleet, staring at the sky above. The storm had begun to subside, the unnatural aurora fading into the distance. But the damage had already been done. Earth had responded, and it had won. The invaders were no more. With the last of the alien ships burning in the atmosphere, the leader understood that there was nothing left to salvage. The empire he had served, the power he had once wielded, had all crumbled in a matter of hours. He had thought that Earth was a simple, primitive world, a world he could conquer with ease. He was wrong. Earth had not only defended itself but had sent a message to the universe. No one could simply take what did not belong to them. The leader's thoughts grew quiet, the storm's fading echoes still ringing in his ears. He couldn't bring himself to move, his body drained, his mind struggling to make sense of what had happened. How had they been so outmatched? How had they underestimated a planet they had thought so insignificant? The answers eluded him. In the distance, the first signs of human life began to emerge. The people of Earth had not engaged the invaders, not in the way the leader had anticipated. There had been no desperate last stand, no resistance fighters running through the streets. Instead, Earth had fought with the fury of a force far greater than any army, its power rooted in the very core of the planet itself. The leader watched as humans cautiously emerged from the safety of their homes, witnessing the destruction that had befallen their city. They had seen the sky darken, the ground tremble, and the ships fall from the heavens. They had felt the wrath of their planet, but they hadn't fought back directly. They hadn't needed to. As the leader looked at the humans, he realized something profound. Earth's strength was not in its weapons or its people alone. It was in the harmony between them and their world. Earth was alive, not in a biological sense, but in a deeper, older way. And when its balance was threatened, when it was provoked, Earth could not be ignored. It would fight back in a way that no conqueror could understand, using a force that transcended technology, a force that only the planet itself could wield. The leader's body sank to the ground, his once mighty form no more than a shadow of what it had been. There was nothing left for him now. Earth had proven its power, and he, along with his empire, would be nothing more than a footnote in its history. As the sun began to set, casting an orange glow over the ruined city, the humans stood still, watching the skies clear. They were alive. Earth was alive, and no force from beyond their world could ever take that away.